Welcome back to another episode of Designing with Purpose. I'm your host, Kyle Stewart, and this show we talk all about architecture, but it's more than just talking about buildings. We're really talking about the people and clients that buildings are meant to serve. And so I'm here with the team at Thrive Architects. Today I'm joined by firm principal Jeremy Bartlett and interior design director. Did I say that right, Beth?
Director of Interior Design.
Director
Very
of
close.
Interior Design, Beth Bokelman. We had her on the show last week as well, and so we're excited to have her back talking more about interior design. And specifically today, we're diving into what really makes a space feel meaningful, functional, intentional, because that's really at the core of what you guys are trying to do here. So, Beth, I'll start with you today. What makes a space truly feel meaningful? What are you trying to accomplish?
I've been giving this some thought, and really the meaning really comes down to, I think, proportion, using light, whether it be natural or artificial, having textures and flow, which makes and creates the harmony of the space.
Let's break those down a little bit. So you mentioned light. Can you give some
Yeah,
examples of how you would use light to create kind of intention and purpose in a space? What are some different ways you can do that?
sure. Whether it be like a natural light space where you have floor to ceiling windows, or you have skylights, you have natural light coming in, which plays off of the materials and the space as a whole, or you have artificial lighting being ceiling lights, pendants, decorative lighting, wall lighting, under cabinet lighting, task lighting, all of those things, depending on how you're using the space, is depending on what fixture you're going to use or combination of.
Got it. So there's a lot of different options for lighting. What about some of the other things that you mentioned as well? The like flow, for example. I've heard both of you guys mention that a few times in different conversations. What do you mean when you talk about the flow of a space?
Jeremy, do you want to take on one of these?
Yeah, I could jump in anytime.
Yeah.
So first off, we made some big adjustments today. We had a big snowstorm, so we're
Yes.
coming to you live from our home offices. But yeah, the connection in the space is really what we're alluding to there, Kyle. So connection as you walk through, maybe that's in the messaging. If you had a space and you wanted to carry a message through the space, design message through the space. Maybe it's a theme, such as, let's say you're trying to create an interior environment that is for, let's say it's at a worship space and it's in the education area of the worship space, and you had maybe a biblical message or theme behind that carried through to each classroom. Perhaps it's a repetitive signage element marking each classroom as you walk down the hallways, or perhaps it's wall decorations. Just it could be randomly anything. I just kind of spitball here as we go, but that's what we mean by that.
So with some of these things that you're mentioning, I know there's a lot more, but it sounds to me like a lot of people tend to think that if they want something to look high end or feel really quality, that equals high dollar amounts. And obviously there's certainly high dollar amounts to be spent on nice fixtures and finishes and all of that. But like we talked about last week too, you guys really focus on working within people's budget. So can you kind of bust that myth a little bit for us in terms of not having to spend tons and tons of money in order to accomplish the intention that you want to with the space?
Yeah, and I think when the space is done in a meaningful way, when your design choices support how the people live and feel in it, modest materials can really elevate the space and become both usable and beautiful at the same time. And you don't have to use expensive materials to get that feeling. You just really have to create a balance. And materials and textures are like chosen to create that balance and really not as much to impress.
Yeah, if I could touch on this a little bit. I mean, every client has a budget, and you have to start out with some parameters and set some goals. Gold plated doesn't mean actual gold. The like an example of that. I mean, there's always multiple ways to go about when you design. There's multiple ways to go about putting a package together. And so, for instance, Beth might take and sit down with a client and we'll come up with scenario one, scenario two, scenario three. All of them have a little bit different price range. That doesn't mean that there's necessarily a compromise there. It means that there's a different material that you could be using. For instance, instead of LVT, perhaps you're using carpet in this area. Or instead of using wallpaper in one area, you're using paint. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're giving up or losing anything in the design. What it does mean is that you are using different materials or you're applying different techniques.
If there was kind of a set of materials or finishes that are like the core to focus on for people who are considering designing a space where they want to accomplish what we're talking about, a meaningful, purposeful space, what are kind of the core elements that you would advise them that at the very least you need to think through these 3 to 5 things?
I would say flooring is number one because that is such a huge part of the material package. Wall texture, wall application, number two. Um, lighting, number three. Things, um, number four. Yeah, and then it just comes down like millwork and your cabinetry. That all plays into whether you do real wood or laminate, and like Jeremy said too, like LVP or carpet. Those are the areas that I would start with.
Okay. Because I'm sure that for a lot of people, design gets very overwhelming because, as you mentioned too, just with lighting alone, there's so many different options. So I think it's important or helpful if you can narrow it down for them to at least know, okay, here's the main ones to focus on.
Right, right. And two, when I'm working on a package like that, really color is one of the first things we like to work with. Like, is this going to be a cool color scheme, a warm color scheme? And then that's where I start to pull in my materials and organize from the floor on up to the ceiling. And really, that's where I add in texture um, and other design aesthetics, just depending on what space I'm doing.
Yeah. Are there certain spaces like, bedrooms versus kitchens versus living areas where you tend to go with a warm color palette or wood tones over versus like a cold or cooler one?
I have been tending to go more warm in residential just because it gives you that more cozy, intimate feeling. And cool tones, you can use cool tones and warm tones in public spaces. Cool tones usually just because it's a light and bright feeling. That's just how I generally been attacking it. Yeah.
So I would imagine you kind of combine both of those, like for senior living, for example, which
Yeah.
is a big one for you guys. That's a great area to, I would imagine, combine both, where you're trying to create a cozy, home-like environment for people, maybe with some warmer design, but then you've got some areas where you can use those cooler palettes as well for
hmm
the commercial spaces. Very good. Well, anything else you want to say, Jeremy, as we wrap it up here, talking about creating meaningful spaces for people?
No, I mean, really just that we're here and we're very flexible with the way we approach design, and we're very personable, and hopefully that comes through in a video like this. And if you're watching, feel free to reach out. We're available at 833-380-6180 or at the web, thrive-architects.com. Just reach on out and we're here to help.
All right. Thanks a lot, you guys. Good talking to you today about designing meaningful, purposeful spaces. That's all we've got time for today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode of Designing with Purpose.